Hey everyone, Rogue Gold here, and today I want to discuss the Dark Zone, and more specifically the loot that drops in there, because it's been a pretty prominent topic, I would say, these last few weeks within the community, especially after TU11 has come and gone as far as its release schedule. Currently, the loot in the Dark Zone is set to challenging difficulty, so I think you can still get purples, and the rolls are usually mid-range, like 60%-ish of the bars is kind of the average, I would say, of challenging difficulty, no matter where you are in the game. Now, I personally remember that the devs mentioned they wanted to increase the loot quality in the DZ up to heroic, but clearly that didn't happen with TU11. Now, I can't remember specifically when they said that. It was on one of the State of the Games. I want to say maybe for TU10, like the PTS for that. I don't specifically remember, and we will come back to this, but it is clearly something that they are looking at and something that I've seen a lot of other people ask for, considering the Dark Zone loot is pretty, subpar compared to other, pretty relatively efficient sources within the game. Now, we do have some new info coming from one of the devs regarding the subject, and so that is why I wanted to make this video and cover it and give my own thoughts on the topic and what could be done to get the DZ loot increased to heroic or, something like that. But before we get to that, I want to really quickly take a trip down memory lane to when Warlords first dropped, because if you remember, the DZ loot when Warlords dropped was at heroic. That's where the loot quality was. And in those first, week, I want to say, before they tuned it down to challenging, the Dark Zone was popping. You would go in there and there would always be people in there. Now, of course, you have to consider that that was the first week after a new expansion drop, so of course there's going to be a lot of people playing the game. But people like Wids, who have said in the past that they don't like the Dark Zone in Division 2, a ton of different streamers and YouTubers and just people were in the Dark Zone because it was worthwhile loot, and still to this day, the Dark Zone is one of the most efficient loot farming sources in the game. Regardless of whether or not it's good loot, the, time it takes to clear a landmark, get your drops, and move on is very quick. And even though extractions are risky, it's not, compared to the draw of getting heroic loot, it wasn't that much of a deal. So, heroic in the Dark Zone can be very beneficial for the population and the health of the Dark Zone and how popular it is. And so, I think if we can appease to some of the devs' wants for it, because as we'll get to, there are some requirements they want before they bump it up, I think it could be super beneficial for the game and the DZ overall. Alright, so let's get to the dev tweets that I was talking about. The dev in question is Nicky Coupons. I'm sure you guys have seen him many times on State of the Game. He handles a lot of loot-based stuff, and so this is definitely his area of expertise. Nesto reached out to him on Twitter saying, Nicky, another thing since we're on the loot roll topic, can DZ loot be buffed? Right now, the LDZ is far superior for farming than the DZ. This really discourages people from entering the zones. I wonder if there's something that can be done with DZ loot. Now, really quick, I do want to mention that I don't know if he means that the LDZ is superior because the drops are better in the LDZ. That's certainly true if you set your world difficulty to heroic. I still think that the DZ is more efficient time-wise than a lot of other activities in the game, like I was saying, but I digress. Let's move on. Nicky replies, I agree that DZ rewards should be better, but also feel that the risk should be higher. I know there's a bit of chicken and egg when it comes to players in the DZ, but what I mean is that the DZ needs more adjustments than just higher loot rolls. So then I jumped into the conversation because, like I was saying, I thought I'd remember them saying this in the past. So I said, I thought either you or Bruce had mentioned on State of the Game that DZ rewards would be brought up to heroic quality for what I thought was TU11. Did something change there? So then Nicky replied to me saying, I'm sure at one point one of us had said something similar to what I wrote above, but none of us had confirmed anything happened to it because there won't be any changes in TU11. So yeah, that's understandable. They didn't confirm anything. I just remembered them saying that they were looking to do that, but clearly he, has some thoughts on what needs to change beyond just the loot increase. So then my response here is what I want to expand upon for the topic of this video. I said, got it. My 2 cents for increasing the risk for the DZ would be to make the landmark NPCs heroic difficulty while limiting the street patrols to red and veterans. However, you could increase the number and variety of the ambusher faction traps to increase environmental risk and danger. So let's talk about that there. I think there are two, big things that I point out and then one kind of minor one. Heroic NPCs need to be in there if they want to increase it to heroic quality loot. I mean, I don't necessarily, care either way, but clearly Nicky wants there to be more risk in the DZ if they're going to increase the loot, and I think that's an easy way to do it. You match the NPCs, because right now, I want to say the Dark Zone ads are set to challenging because that's the loot quality. They're really easy to kill. Like, heroic landmarks in the DZ, the difficulty in the DZ just dictates the number of waves that are at each landmark, if you didn't know. And so a heroic landmark in the DZ really only takes you like 5 minutes if you're efficient. And depending on what landmark, how, close proximity it is, but it's really easy to clear those out and get your loot. And so I think if they do want to increase the loot quality to heroic, the easiest way to increase the risk is to up those ads as well. But that doesn't mean I think that the patrols in the streets should stay all gold and be heroic, because I'll tell you right now, both in Division 1 and 2, street patrols in the Dark Zone are the most annoying thing that is in there. Because nothing is more annoying than you being manhunt, or you're chasing manhunts and you're trying to just, navigate your way through the streets and get away from a fight, and you run into a gold patrol and they kill you. Like, that's just the worst feeling ever. And so, I've said this before, I don't know if I've ever said it in a video, but certainly to people I've talked to in game, that they really need to reduce the street patrols to just Reds and Veterans if they even want to keep them in at all. Because that way, even if they are heroic difficulty adds, you can kill Reds and Veterans a whole lot easier than, plated and armored golds and dogs if you're in the invaded DZ. It would just be so much better if that's how it was. And so if they were to do this, I would really hope they would consider, tuning down those street patrols to Reds and Veterans. But then if you want to make the landmarks entirely gold ads, go for it. Landmarks are supposed to be a bit challenging, and currently they're really not. So I think that's the easiest way to do it. My other idea in here, however, I think could be pretty interesting, and I said that they could increase the number and variety of the ambusher faction traps to increase environmental risk and danger. If you haven't encountered them before, I'm sure you have, but it might not be super obvious why it's happening. There is a mechanic in the game that the ambusher faction uses, and if you don't know, those are the ones that are underground. I think they're the ones with the chainsaw guy. Basically, and this can happen in both the Dark Zone and the open world, they set up a tripwire that can be very hard to see, but you can see it. And if you run over it, that's when you get blinded, and all of a sudden, like 3 or 4 ads come and rush out at you. Those types of traps, I think, could be very cool if they expanded upon that idea and added more of them, for them to add into the DZ to increase that environmental risk and danger. Because that's the whole idea of the Dark Zone, right? It's not just that the ads are, super lethal. It's that the environment is supposed to be dangerous itself. So I think if they could increase that, it could be really cool. And a reference point for what this could look like is something, I'm not saying exactly, but something like what we saw in Underground and Survival in Division 1. There were bombs on the walls and on the streets that were proximity based. There were different traps that you could shoot to make sure they didn't get you, fire hoses coming down from the ceiling. If they implemented some of that kind of stuff into the Dark Zone, possibly using this ambusher faction, idea, where let's say you're going down an alley, and not only could there be tripwires you have to watch out for, but there's certain watchtowers or, sniper spots that these ads sit at. And instead of there just being gold patrols in the streets, if you saw this spotter in the tower, you know that if you run down that alley, he's going to signal out and a bunch of ads are going to come and ambush you. That could be really cool, because that way you're not just forced to run into this group of ads that are already on the street. You have a chance to see this guy, this spotter up in the tower, and know you have to avoid that way in order to avoid all those ads coming and ambushing you. Could be really cool. And then, like I said, beyond the tripwire stuff, that could add those bombs around certain corners that you can hear, audibly, so that you have a chance to either take it out and shoot it or just avoid that spot altogether. I think they could really work in some of these stuff to make the Dark Zone a lot more environmentally dangerous, and that could be a really cool way to increase the risk factor beyond just making the ads tankier, because no one really wants that. And especially those street patrols, no one likes the gold ones now, and so to think those on heroic is just a terrible idea. So if they could implement some of these ideas, I think it could be really cool, and especially if they make those landmark ads gold, it could give landmarks that sense of challenge again that really makes the loot feel rewarding and is worth the risk for the whole, concept of the DZ. So there you have it, guys. Those are my thoughts on how the risk factor for the DZ could be increased so that we could warrant some of Nikki's concerns and help the devs really increase the loot quality to heroic. I think if we could get the loot increased, like I said, it could be very beneficial for both the game and the DZ overall. It would increase the populations, no doubt, and it would make those targeted days on the DZ even more, worthwhile than they are now, because even now, on a day where it's targeted Providence or something else useful in the DZ, you see a good amount of people in there trying to farm, get some good items, because you get so many drops. But if it was heroic, and if there was some increased risk factor to warrant those drops, it could be an awesome experience that I think could really prolong the lifespan of this game and the Dark Zone. So that's all I've got to say on that topic, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe with notifications on so you can be updated every time I upload. Head down to the comments and let me know your own thoughts on this topic. If you like or agree with any of my ideas for increasing the risk in the DZ, and what some of your own thoughts might be on how we could do that, and if you even believe that the DZ needs an increase in loot. I don't know if everyone necessarily wants that to increase the risk factor as well, so I'm very interested to hear your guys' thoughts on the whole matter. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day, and until the next one, guys, row gold. Out.